להתפשט מקליפותיי, לפשט את חיי כמו שאת, כמו שאת. תן לי רגע קט לעצור את הזמן, אם כל רגע חולף אני נסחפת אל תוך מציאות שונה. תן לי רגע קטן להתפשט מקליפותיי, לפשט את חיי כמו שאת, כמו שאת. תן לי רגע לחלון בלבך, גם היופי עובר פתאום נשאר חלום. תפתח את נשמתך, אם באהבה תחפש איך תהיה עם עצמך, עם כל אדם, עם כל החי בעולמך. כה פשוט הוא היופי, להיות ללא דופי כמו שאת. כה פשוט הוא היופי, להיות ללא דופי כמו שאת, כמו שאת. לעצור את הזמן, אם כל רגע חולף אני נסחפת אל תוך מציאות שונה. תן לי רגע קטן להתפשט מקליפותיי, לפשט את חיי כמו שאת, כמו שאת. כה פשוט הוא היופי, להיות ללא דופי כמו שאת. כה פשוט הוא היופי, להיות ללא דופי כמו שאת, כמו שאת.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin in 10 minutes.
זוכרת נובמבר, עננים עננים בעיניי, אלה לא היו חייך ולא ממש חיי. יום ועוד יום ועוד יום בלעדיך ובלעדיי, כבר לא היה לנו לא איך ולא היה התפוצצנו מאהבה קרה. תראה איזה סוף הסרט, כבר לא זוכרת ההתחלה. אני עוזבת בסוף ימים ארוכים בלילה, כמו שהיינו אחד, אז עכשיו זה בנפרד, על המיטה מביטה, זה לא אתה. לא תבין לעולם למה הוצאתי אותך מחיי, מלא במילותיך וריק משתיקותיי. אתה אומר היה מושלם וככה סתם, ואיך זה שאת לא בוכה. אני הולכת ממך, אני הולכת ממך. בסוף ימים ארוכים בלילה, כמו שהיינו אחד, אז עכשיו זה בנפרד, על המיטה מביטה, זה לא אתה. בלילה, כמו שהיינו אחד, אז עכשיו זה בנפרד, על המיטה מביטה, זה לא אתה. זוכרת נובמבר, עננים עננים בעיניי.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take a moment to greet fellow delegates around you and welcome one another to the AIPAC conference. Our program will begin in 7 minutes.
הולכת ברוטשילד, כבר לא אכפת לי לחזור ולזכור. שוב שומעת שירים שאהבת, בלי להעביר תחנה. וכשמישהו בדלת כבר לא מחזירה פעימה. טיפה טיפה אני חוזרת לעצמי, טיפה טיפה אני אוספת את השקט שלי, אולי אפילו מתייפה. טיפה טיפה 95 דקות סרט, לגמרי שכחתי אותנו. השחקן לא הזכיר לי אותך, הסיפור לא מזכיר את שלנו. והמספר אצלך, אני כבר לא בטוחה אם נגמר ב7 או 2. וככל שאתה נעלם, שוב זורם לי הדם לעל חיים. טיפה טיפה אני חוזרת לעצמי, טיפה טיפה אני אוספת את השקט שלי, אולי אפילו מתייפה. טיפה טיפה הולכת ברוטשילד, כבר לא אכפת לי לחזור ולזכור. שוב שומעת שירים שאהבת, בלי להעביר תחנה, וכשמישהו בדלת כבר לא מחזירה פעימה. טיפה טיפה אני חוזרת לעצמי, טיפה טיפה אני אוספת את השקט שלי, אולי אפילו מתייפה. טיפה טיפה אני חוזרת לעצמי, טיפה טיפה אני אוספת את השקט שלי, אולי אפילו מתייפה. טיפה 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 טיפה.
הירידה הזו לרחוב החם הייתה בשבילי נתיב לעולם של שיקור מוכר מעלה ביקר עם בוטנים וסירופ אדום של סוכר, חגורה ב10 וקלטת מתנה, מיץ ענבים ועיתון להמתנה, קולנוע שמקרין סרטים של זימה וכובע של פרסים רקמה. הייתי יורד בתחנה הישנה, והיא הייתה לי מדינה אחרת, מדינה של מציאות בהמתנה, כשגשם יורד וכשהשמש בוערת. פתאום אני שייך ולפעמים אני אחר, בתוך עולם צפוף וממהר, בשדרות הנעליים הזולות, בדוכני פלאפל עם כל התוספות, שירותים ציבוריים שרחם למרחוק, נהגי מוניות שלא למדו לשתוק, שיקור ועיוור מסתכלים על העולם, אברכים מרוויחים מצווה חינם. הייתי יורד בתחנה הישנה, והיא הייתה לי מדינה אחרת, מדינה של מציאות בהמתנה, כשגשם יורד וכשהשמש בוערת. לתל אביב המבריקה, אני יוצר במציאות הסדוקה, של פיתה עם זעתר וביצה בצד, של ספק רבנים, ספק פושטי יד, ב10 שקלים 3 קלטות ושירים מוכרים.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a courtesy to our speakers, flash photography is prohibited. Please turn off your cell phones and take your seats. Our program will begin in 5 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin in 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the AIPAC Policy Conference. Our program will now begin. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AIPAC member Bella Tovey.
Good morning. When I was a young girl in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp, there was no Israel, no IDF to defend us, and the idea of an independent Jewish state was only a dream. There are people sitting in this room who remember what that was like. When I was a young woman, Israel was declared a state. And there are people in this room who remember the elation of that moment. But who could have imagined nearly 67 years later what would blossom in the desert? Ladies and gentlemen, this is Israel.
This is an ancient land.
A homeland.
A holy land.
Birthplace of religions.
Of heritage.
This is history.
Hope realized.
A safe haven.
Hard fought.
Deeply loved.
This is resilience. Determination.
Democracy.
Diversity.
Acceptance.
This is family.
Beauty.
Seeking peace.
Reaching beyond borders.
An ancient promise for the modern world. This is Israel.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome musician first class Kenny Ray Horton, lead singer of the U.S. Navy Band, for the singing of the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Private Tamar Ben-Ozer Feingold of the IDF Outstanding Musicians Program for the singing of Hatikvah.
קולות בלבב פנימה, נפש יהודי הומיה, ולפתי מזרח קדימה, עין לציון צופיה, עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו, התקווה בת שנות 2000, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים, להיות עם חופשי בארצנו, ארץ ציון וירושלים.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former CNN anchor Frank Sesno.
Good morning. Good morning. Better with that, you can melt the snow and the ice before it's all done. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Welcome to Washington at a very important and challenging time. And over the next few days, as you know, you will have a chance to hear from prominent American leaders, Israeli officials, dignitaries from around the world. Each of them, and all of you in this room, are here to engage a conversation, a fulsome conversation about and between these determined and democratic allies. Now, in the years that I've had the opportunity and the privilege to be here with you, posing questions, joining the conversation, I've been impressed by the great diversity of the pro-Israeli community, the respect among all of those really who come together here for this conversation. Now, our next two guests, and I'm fascinated to hear them, and I'm sure you will be as well, represent the bipartisan support for the U.S.-Israeli relationship in the Senate. And yes, there is actually bipartisan support for something in this country. In fact, if there's time, I may ask them how we can have more bipartisan support here in Washington. Senators Ben Cardin and Lindsey Graham are two committed leaders on the issue. They are outspoken. They have consistently voiced their support for Israel in a variety of forums, and they have been among the most outspoken advocates for preventing a nuclear-capable Iran, which is a subject that comes at a very significant moment as well. I'm privileged to welcome here this morning to discuss these most pressing issues. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Senators Ben Cardin and Lindsey Graham. You get a fanfare like that every time you go to Capitol?
Oh, it's everywhere I go. It's awful.
Well, welcome.
At breakfast.
Welcome to you both. I'd like to do policy before we do politics, and certainly there is ample subject for both. Let's start with the policy, Senator Graham, and the specifics on Iran and the negotiations. The deadline for the political framework agreement with Iran over its nuclear program is 3 weeks away. The conversations are virtually ongoing and have been for 15 months with multiple extensions. I'm interested in how you assess the talks so far.
Well, one, I'm glad we're negotiating because diplomacy would be the right answer versus war. Do you all agree with that? Nobody wants another war with anyone. Having said that, rather than prejudging the negotiations and a deal, what I would like to do is have Congress to look at the deal, debate the deal, and a vote on the deal. If it is a good deal, I would vote for it, because let me tell you what happens if you play politics with the deal. If a Republican wants to vote no just because we don't like Obama, then your political resume and history will look very bad, because we all need a good deal. On the other hand, a bad deal is a nightmare for us, Israel, and the world, and it is a way to stop a bad deal. Time will tell, but between now and until that day comes, let us commit ourselves to make sure that as many eyes as possible are on this deal before it becomes binding.
How do you define how do you define a bad deal?
A bad deal would be a deal that would allow Iran one day to develop a nuclear weapon under the guise. We're not clapping for the nuclear weapon. A bad deal would be locking in place an enrichment program that is only monitored by the UN, and the only thing between a breakout to a nuclear weapon is the UN. How does that make you feel? The only thing between you, Israel, is the UN in terms of keeping Iran in check. A good deal would be a peaceful nuclear power program that the Iranians claim they want that could never turn into a weapon. That's a good deal. Anything beyond that's a bad deal.
Senator Cardin, what is your take on this?
First, thank you all for being here. This is we need you on Capitol Hill, so thank you for coming to Washington. It's great to be here with Lindsey Graham. The two of us are good friends. And yes, we do work together, a Democrat and Republican, and there is strong bipartisan support for Israel, and we're going to make sure that we maintain that support. The two of us completely agree that a good deal is what we need. We want a diplomatic solution. We want Iran to give up its nuclear weapon program. We want Iran to be in compliance with its international obligations. That has to be a very transparent agreement, an agreement that prevents Iran from breaking out to a nuclear weapon, and one in which we have inspectors there on the ground, total access to all parts of Iran to make sure that we know what they're doing. Because quite frankly, you can't trust Iran.
Right.
You must make sure that you have an enforceable agreement.
So Senator Cardin, you're
and
one
he's
of
the Democrat.
Senator Cardin, you're one of 11 Democrats who favors increased sanctions if you don't get a deal by the 24th. Prospects for a deal by the 24th, and do you expect your colleagues in the Senate to go along with you on this?
Well, let's make it clear. The only reason that Iran is negotiating with the United States and our coalition partners is because we, the United States Congress, and the United States led with strong sanctions and isolated Iran. That's the only reason. They don't want to voluntarily give up their nuclear weapon program. So we've got to keep the heat on. We've got to keep strong sanctions against Iran. And yes, we hope we have an agreement. If we don't, then we need to tighten those sanctions and make them stronger. And I have no doubt whatsoever that Congress will pass stronger sanctions if there's no agreement reached.
Senator Graham, we're watching the talks, the international talks, and I'm wondering what you make of this international group, right, that is negotiating with Iran. Marching in lockstep, U.S. leading?
I don't really have a lot of faith in the Russians to get us to the promised land. But
this is a very difficult situation.
It is
right?
a very
where
difficult.
the Russians are going these days.
And the outcome affects the entire world, not just Israel and the United States. But put in context what's going on during the negotiations. As we negotiate with the Iranians, they have toppled 4 Arab capitals. What would they do with sanction relief money? Do you think they would build schools and hospitals? Given their behavior today, they're likely to invest in their military to wreak more havoc. As we speak, they have toppled the pro-American government in Yemen. They have supported the Houthis, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Now we don't have the eyes and ears we need because Iran has destabilized Yemen. Assad is a puppet of Iran who's killed 220,000 of his own people. Hezbollah is a nightmare for Israel and Lebanon and the entire region. And Shiite militias backed by Iran are wreaking havoc all over Iraq. These are the people we're trying to negotiate with about a nuclear weapon. This is what they're doing without a nuclear weapon. What do you think they would do if they had one? And what do you think they're intending to do long term? Become a member of the family of nations? So it bothers me greatly that as we negotiate on their nuclear ambitions, they're using their conventional forces and their political influence to destabilize the region. So the first thing in a deal, P5+1, you got to know who you're dealing with. They lie, they cheat, they're not trustworthy, they've killed Americans, they would destroy Israel tomorrow if they could. So understand who you're dealing with.
Gentlemen, let me ask you both, and Senator Cardin, why don't you go first, just very briefly. If these talks have been extended multiple times, if a deal isn't reached by the 24th, then what?
Well, we got to have deadlines. We've got to reach agreements, or we have to take other actions. I think that is clear. It's already been delayed at least once or twice already. Iran's got to make a decision whether it's going to move forward or not. We've heard conflicting views as to whether they'll enter into an agreement or not. We know that it's only because of the U.S. pressure that we've been able to get as far as we've gotten. But the bottom line is that Iran has to make a decision. If they decide not to move forward, then we have to toughen the sanctions. We have to toughen the isolation. We've got to work with the international community. They are in violation of the UN resolutions. We've got to make sure there are consequences to their actions. And I think we're prepared to do that. But as Lindsey has said, this is not just about Israel's security. This is about the security of the region. It's not just Israel talking to us about what Iran is doing. Every moderate Arab state's talking to us about whether Iran is going to be able to move forward with their nuclear weapon program, because it affects their security. This affects the regional security, affects global security. So there's a lot at stake.
Can I just build on that? It's commonly viewed that Israel has a nuclear arsenal. They will not tell you that, but if I were you, I would not bet against that. Not one Arab nation has felt a need to go nuclear because Israel is perceived to have a nuclear weapon, because they know this democracy in Israel is not going to wake up one day and wipe them off the map. They're a democratic state that truly is trying to coexist peacefully in the region. Every Arab leader, Ben hit a good point here, that I've met with, and I've met with them all, have told me to my face, anything you give the Iranians, we're going to want that and more. The Arabs do not trust the Shia Persians with a nuclear capability, and a bad deal that leads to nuclear proliferation in the Mideast is a nightmare for the world, and I'm afraid that's where we're headed.
Gentlemen, we're here at a challenging time in the relationship between the United States and Israel, and the Prime Minister will be speaking to the Congress in just a couple of days. And that has provoked concerns about the relationship. I want to ask you what your take is on this and how these turbulent waters should be navigated. Senator Cardin.
Well, the circumstances surrounding the invitation is not how it should have been. We all understand that. But don't lose focus. The bad guy is Iran. Iran's who's violating international agreements. The focus must be on the Iranian negotiations. And this gives us a chance to come together in a strong, united way to make sure that we are focused on what is necessary for an acceptable deal with Iran on its nuclear weapons. And secondly, we can never allow Israel to become a political wedge issue. It's too important to the United States. It's got to be off limits.
Senator Graham, are you worried about the relationship?
I look forward to listening to the Prime Minister of our best friend in the region. I will be there on the front row. I will listen to his evaluation of where we're at, what a good deal would look like to Israel, what a bad deal would look like. Then I'll have to decide what's best for America. If I had to pick, Frank, between BB's speech and the 10 to 15,000 AIPAC members, I would pick the AIPAC members to be in Washington. Because you are going to go to your representatives and your senators, and you're going to lend voice to the U.S.-Israel relationship better than any politician could ever hope to do. You are the Marines. The Marines have landed in Washington at a time we need somebody here. I welcome the Prime Minister's speech. I look forward to hearing what he has to say, but thank God you are here, because I look forward to you coming to Capitol Hill, lobbying for our bill to require Congress to review any deal with Iran before it becomes binding. And I want to remind you of what your core principles say. AIPAC will support measures to prevent the development, acquisition, and proliferation by Iran, Israel's neighbors, and terrorist organizations of weapons of mass destruction and the means of their delivery. This is one of your core principles. This is why you should be here this week. Make sure you live up to these core principles. To my AIPAC friends, you're going to make more difference than any speech any politician could ever deliver.
I have been in this town for a long time and covered a lot of things, and I've covered a lot of sort of ups and downs in this relationship, as in the relationship we've seen with Britain, the special relationship there, or anywhere else. Senator Cardin, just very briefly, how do you assess the U.S.-Israeli relationship over time and where we are now?
I think it's very strong. I think Americans understand the importance of Israel to the United States, and we understand the importance of that relationship. It's our trusted ally in that region. We share intelligence information. We share values. It's a long-standing relationship that has benefited both countries. We also understand how important that relationship is to the State of Israel, that the State of Israel is isolated internationally. Just look at the votes in the United Nations if you want to see the vulnerability of Israel. So this relationship is very, very important. So I think it's strong. I think it's bipartisan. I think it's bicameral. I think it's the administration and Congress, and we need to make sure that we work on keeping it in that healthy, strong way in this country.
Senator Cardin, another issue, and Senator Graham, jump in on this, and that is the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign that's out there. You've been outspoken on this one. I'm wondering where you think this is going and what it means right now.
Well, thanks for mentioning that, because we could use your help. There's going to be legislation introduced this week by Senator Portman and I concerning BDS legislation. Israel, let me try to explain that. I already indicated, and Senator Graham and I have talked about what we can do about it, but Israel's isolated internationally. We know that. Look at the UN votes, look how they're discriminated against. The United States enters into trade agreements with countries we agree with. There's a free trade agreement between Israel and the United States because we understand how important that is to world commerce. When you look at Israel and what it's able to do, a small country with its technology and innovation and its scientists, it's important for Israel, it's important for the United States, it's important for the global community. When you have boycotts, divestiture, and sanctions legislation, you're discriminating against Israel, and the United States should take stands to make sure other countries that want trade agreements with the United States do not participate in BDS against Israel. And that's what this legislation will do, and we need your help in order to get it done.
Senator Graham, anything you'd like to add?
If I'm not a co-sponsor, I will be. This is like coming to church for me.
Really?
I'm counting it. Tell all the Baptists back home I was there. And all the Baptists back home will be there with you, too, by the way. So, bipartisanship. AIPAC is the glue that holds this relationship together. Don't ever lose sight of that. You matter now, you're going to matter more in the future. God bless you. If you were not here, I don't know what would happen. Israel ran out of rockets during the last war with Hamas. Remember that episode? A Congress that can't agree on Sunday should be a day off. The most dysfunctional place I've been in a while. In about 2 hours, Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell, when the Democrats were in charge, passed a $225 million appropriations bill to fund the Iron Dome without one objection in the United States Senate. And can I just add one other thing?
Yeah.
I am now, as the Republicans taking over the body, if you're a Democrat, we'll probably screw this up. If you're a Republican, let's enjoy it while we have it. I am now the chairman of the Foreign Relations Subcommittee on Appropriations. What does that mean? That means that all the money that goes to support the UN and the State Department, Palestinians, and every other ally and enemy we have in the world comes through my committee. Ben's legislation is absolutely important to put countries on notice. I promise you, as chairman of this subcommittee, I'm going to put the United Nations on notice. If they continue to marginalize and delegitimize and accept the anti-Semitism that's running rampant through Europe, we're going to cut their money off too.
Gentlemen, in the very couple of minutes we have left, let's zoom out for a minute. and look at the bigger, broader regional challenge beyond Iran, Syria, Iraq, growth, terrible growth of the Islamic State, fall of the government in Yemen. As you look at the region, the big picture, the big trends, what are you each seeing, Senator?
Well, I see danger. There's no question about it. This is a great risk to the United States and to the civilized world when you're dealing with people who will cut off heads of people that disagree with them, that have no ethics whatsoever. This is an extreme risk. So yes, the United States has to be engaged in the leadership position, and we have to get local support. We don't want to make this a crusade. I've heard that from more and more from Arab leaders, moderate Arab leaders. They have to take care of their own ground needs, but they need our support to cut off the ability of ISIS and ISIL to be able to carry out the type of campaigns they are. So in Iraq, we're working with the government, we're working with the Sunni tribal leaders, we're working with the Kurdish military. In Syria, we're working with the opposition. We have to be engaged. In Yemen, we're going to have to be engaged because this is a real threat against the civilized world, and the United States must be in the leadership.
Senator.
I see radical Islam running wild in the Mideast. That's what I see. It is radical Islam. And if you don't admit that, you'll never defeat it. The good news for us, most people in the Islamic world, in the Muslim faith, do not want to turn their daughters, fathers do not want to turn their daughters over to ISIL. The bad news for us is they're going unchecked. If I could find a way to defend this country from radical Islam without having a forward deployed presence, I would choose it. It is our fight. The King of Jordan is right about this, and he's next if we don't watch it. That this is a war against humanity. They want to master religion just as the Nazis wanted to master race. That's what this is about. And they will kill and imprison and enslave those who are different. They will lose. The only question is, how many must die before the day comes? It is in our national security interest, ladies and gentlemen, to stop this barbaric behavior before it gets stronger. Every day that there are foreign fighters flowing into Iraq and Syria with Western passports, that's the day they could come back here and hit us. This is our war too. This is a war of good people against evil. And there's only one outcome that is acceptable. They lose, we win.
Senators, I find it fascinating, I think we all do, to listen to your perspectives on this and your bipartisanship, and we can only hope that your bipartisanship spreads across the land and across the United States Congress. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Senators Ben Cardin and Lindsey Graham. Thank you.
I would like people to know that the IDF is not like any other military.
For me, serving in the IDF is a natural part in our society.
I feel like I'm part of this country and part of this nation, and I need to do my part in order to make life better for all of its citizens. The best way that I can do that is through music.
Serving in the IDF, it's part of the Israeli existence. Not serving in the army is a stigma. Today less than in the past, but still. The IDF is arranged to meet the needs of different people, different needs. It's a very difficult challenge. I achieved the rank of Brigadier General in the Air Force. When I became Chief Education Officer, Somebody came to me, said to me, my son is a musician, start to play at the age of 6. And now he's in the military, he cannot play. And he's destroyed because in music, if you don't play for 3 years, you know, that's it, the end of you as a musician. Do something. I said, let me check. And I went to experts. The expert was Isaac Stern. And we created this program that is a cooperation between the Ministry of Art and Culture and the IDF. The Outstanding Musician Program enabled the musicians to serve in the army, not to lose their careers. We allow them, we enable them to go to auditions and concerts and competitions, because in this age, if you miss few auditions, few competitions, that's it.
These graduates of the Outstanding Musicians Program, they do not only enrich Israeli culture, Israeli orchestras, Israeli music life, they do this worldwide and in the US, in the finest academic institutions, in most important orchestras, most important venues everywhere. All the members of the orchestra under the age of 45 are graduates of this program. Without them, the orchestra would be almost silent. For me, like for most of the people, he's been like a father and some inspiration, and he's been the head of this Outstanding Musicians Program. Only many years later, I actually read in a book what this guy did in his life.
I was a squadron commander, and during the war of attrition, and it was a real attrition. Being a commander of people that fly is a very exhausting situation. You know, every telephone was frightening. So one day I said to my wife, listen, I feel that I got crazy with all this responsibility, with all this entire situation. I need to do something different. And we thought what we'll do, and we decided to buy a subscription to the orchestra. Sitting there, it was 2 hours of being in a different environment. And slowly I became a classical music lover. You know, you feel that you are in a different place. You feel that things can be better. You feel that, that the world can be beautiful.
I think if the program didn't exist, there would be a decline through generations and through decades of arts and education, and I think we would become a country that doesn't value these kind of things, which we know that the Jewish people always did value these things.
I was 11 years old when I started to play the cello.
I've been singing since I was in the 6th grade.
I've been singing ever since I can remember. Music is culture, and culture is what makes us human. It proves to us that we as a species can make something incredible and amazing. So without this program, Israel wouldn't have musicians. Israel wouldn't have these musical diplomats in the rest of the world who can show everybody that we have more than just an army. We have art.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome members of the IDF Outstanding Musicians Program.
Thank you. The piece we've chosen today, Dvorak's Piano Quintet in A major, is played in celebration of all the great Israeli artists who contribute to our country's society and the world around them. We dedicate this performance to our friend and mentor, the founder of the Outstanding Musicians Program.
I grew up on the south side of Chicago, attended Chicago public schools. My father worked at the post office right downtown here in Chicago, and my mother taught in Chicago public schools. People want to know why I'm involved with AIPAC or pro-Israel lobbying. I got more connected initially on a humanistic side, more so than a political side. I first went to Israel when I went with AIPAC and AIEF. I learned about the 14-second warning system for when rockets were coming in, and that people had to run for cover, and particularly kids couldn't play far away from home. I always thought about what happens if you have 2 kids, or 3. Which ones do you grab as you start to run? But the notion that they couldn't play far away from home because of rockets bore a close resemblance to me of the inner city, where kids couldn't play far away from home because of bullets. While we were in Tel Aviv, we met with an organization that treats the post-traumatic stress and traumatic stress. It was treating people that weren't necessarily in the military, but people that were in warlike situations, just in a day-to-day living. And it dawned on me that it was something that could be useful for some of the residents of urban areas. I sit on the board of Sinai Health Systems. The service area is 1.5 million people in Chicago, and we started a dialogue going, trying to figure out how we can work collaboratively with best practices from Israel. It's something that I would not have been aware of until I went to Israel. I'm president of Loop Capital Markets, and we underwrite and trade securities.
Good morning, Ms. Russell. How are you?
For our business, we have to build relationships, network, get to know decision makers. It's kind of an overlap between the things that are needed in business and the things that are needed in lobbying on Capitol Hill. They're the same skill set. It's just different arenas. AIPAC, to me, is in a lot of ways the embodiment of the First Amendment, that you have the right to petition government and you have the right to peaceably assemble. What it also has done for me is in things that I'm concerned about personally, they've taught me how to have a voice. I'm on the National Council, Congressional Club member. I've gotten to know a number of Congress people, and if there's something that I want to express an opinion on, I have a pretty good idea where to make the phone call.
Around 2:30 Tuesday afternoon.
I had the benefit of going to Israel in early 2014 with the Congressional Black Caucus. We met with President Shimon Peres, and we met for about 1 hour and 40 minutes with Prime Minister Netanyahu. It did cause me to kind of pinch myself as a kid from the south side of Chicago, being in the middle of international politics. My mother would have been happy, would have been proud. That's my boy. One of the reasons it's important to be involved with AIPAC is that you really can make a difference because you're doing things that really benefit America. It's patriotic. If you really strip it back, it's an American movement.
Ladies and gentlemen, AIPAC activist Al Grace. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the CEO and Vice CEO of AIPAC, Howard Kohr and Richard Fishman.
Morning. Morning. Wow, there's a lot of you. Welcome, all of you. You know, in the past few months, the two of us, Howard and I, have traveled all over the United States. We've been in many of your offices, your synagogues, and homes. Sometimes you guys were even there. As we've traveled, we've talked and we've listened. And what we found was amazing commitment, a passionate desire to contribute to our cause, and an urgent desire to make a difference at a critical moment in history. We also found that many of you are facing a set of difficult questions from colleagues, friends, and frankly, decision makers, principally on the topic of Iran. So this morning, we're going to have a family conversation. We're going to talk about Iran, and I'm going to pose to Howard some of the toughest questions that we hear most often. Morning, Howard.
Morning, Richard.
Ready?
Good morning, everyone.
So, So Howard, normally when we do this, we would engage in a little bit of witty repartee before we get started. But I think actually the times really demand that we get right down to business. So I want to start by asking you a question about the relationship itself. Many journalists have written the story that this is a relationship in crisis. And I think a lot of our delegates have come here worried that there's a crisis. Is there?
Richard, this may feel like a crisis, and there are some real strains in the relationships. And there is a serious policy difference, particularly over Iran. But this is not a crisis, and frankly, it's up to us to not let it become a crisis. I deeply believe that the foundation of the U.S.-Israel relationship is strong, broad, and deep.
What are the elements that make that relationship so strong?
Look, there's a lot of different elements to it. There's a strategic element, a military element, an intelligence element. There's a trade dimension to the relationship. There's cooperation in science and health and environment. There's a whole variety of issues, and those remain very strong. And by the way, the Obama administration has helped to strengthen the relationship, particularly in the security and intelligence realm.
I think most of the delegates in this room understand how Israel benefits from the U.S.'s relationship. I wonder if you can spend a moment on how America benefits from its relationship with Israel.
As you point out, look, it's evident to everyone about what the U.S. provides Israel. But look, as the United States looks out in the Middle East, it's looking at a region that's on fire. Nation-states are imploding. They're disintegrating before our eyes. A radical Islamic terrorism is on the march. And when the United States looks out to the Middle East, it sees one nation, and frankly only one nation, that is strong militarily and economically, stable. The transition of power comes through democratic elections, in a vital strategic position, both on the Eastern Mediterranean as well as ability to project into the rest of the Levant, and it shares our values. Oh, by the way, one last thing. It's pro-American.
Right. I want to ask you about the speech. Prime Minister's coming to Washington. He'll be delivering an address to the joint meeting of Congress on Tuesday. That speech has created quite a stir. I wonder if you could take a moment explaining to the delegates how you think they should view this speech.
There's no question that the way this speech has come about has created a great deal of upset amongst Democrats in Congress, House and Senate. It's created some upset, frankly, outside Capitol Hill, and frankly, it may have upset some people in this room. And frankly, all of us should be concerned that care so deeply about the bipartisan support for the U.S.-Israel relationship. But we have spent active hours lobbying for members of the House and the Senate to attend this speech. It's an important speech. The Prime Minister's going to come and speak about the most significant issue, and that is Iran. And when the leader of our greatest ally in the region comes to Washington to talk about the greatest challenge of our time, we hope and can urge members of Congress to be there to hear what he has to say.
So I'd like to talk about what he might say. In fact, I want to get to a variety of concerns. Israel has concerns about the emerging deal and concerns with the administration. AIPAC has some concerns with the administration on Iran, and Congress has some concerns with the administration on Iran. I wonder if we could look at each of those. Let's start with Israel. What is the Prime Minister coming to talk about?
Look, first of all, we have to remind ourselves that these negotiations are taking place without the countries most directly affected by the Iranian threat, not the only ones, but the most affected, which are our allies in the region, including Israel. They're not at the negotiating table, so we have to remember that. And I think the principal concern is that these negotiations started about almost 2 years ago, focused on an international coalition that was going to focus on dismantling the Iranian nuclear infrastructure. And somehow, these negotiations now have morphed into a bilateral negotiation focused only on delaying the nuclear program.
And why is that shift such a problem?
Look, for the world, and most particularly Israel, and we'll hear this directly from the Prime Minister, I believe, is a country that has the intention of destroying Israel and has been cheating for the last 20 years and lying to the international community about this nuclear program, and now may be left on the threshold of having this nuclear weapons capability. You put those three things together, and you understand very clearly why Israel's so concerned about this. You marry intention with cheating and now emerging capabilities, it's a real danger.
So it begs the question, is there a deal that's good enough from Israel's perspective? Is the Prime Minister and Israel against diplomacy?
No, the Prime Minister and Israel, and frankly not just Israel, Congress and AIPAC have been for a diplomatic outcome to Iran's nuclear project. It is the far and away preferred option. But we believe that the only way you can get to a good deal is through dramatic pressure on the regime in Tehran. Yes, they are deeply ideologically committed, and it's at the very heart of this regime that they want this nuclear weapon. And only dramatic pressure here can compel them to give it up.
So is the Prime Minister coming to plead just Israel's case with regard to Iran?
No, but it'd be sufficient if he only did that, I would argue, because they're our most important ally in that part of the world, but he's not. Look, the danger that Iran poses here, first of all, I would argue it's our greatest, America's greatest national security threat, but it's also all of our allies in the Middle East. Every pro-American ally in the Middle East is threatened by the regime in Tehran, who's seeking to destabilize them now. Forget about if they had a nuclear weapon. This is a regime that is the single greatest supporter of state-sponsored terrorism. We have to remember, they have the blood of Americans still on their hands. And the final piece, every Sunni government in the region will not allow this radical Shiite regime in Tehran to have nuclear weapons. This, we believe, even a bad deal could set this off. Here could create a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. So think about that. A nuclear arms race in the most unstable, volatile, dangerous part of the world. All of those things have nothing to do with Israel and have everything to do with the region and the danger that Iran poses.
Yes. I want to shift to AIPAC and go back to your point about pressure earlier. One of the central differences we have with the administration is over the question of more pressure now. We believe that in order to get a good deal, more pressure is required on the Iranians now. The administration disagrees with that pretty vehemently. Why?
Yeah, look, it's our assessment that pressure, dramatic economic pressure, is what brought the Iranians to the negotiating table. Without that, they wouldn't be at the table. And unfortunately, from our perspective, when we started this round of negotiations, we eased up on that pressure. And that's why we think more pressure needs to apply prior to an agreement, which is why we've been so supportive of efforts in the Congress to do exactly that.
So why doesn't the White House agree with that? It sounds logical.
Yeah, look, they are concerned about two things. They're concerned that the Iranians might leave the negotiating table. And here, by the way, it's important to remember, Iran needs this deal more than we do. That's an important point to remember. They're worried that the Iranians will leave the table. And they're also worried that if we put too much pressure on our allies, that our allies will stop supporting the sanctions that are in place against them.
Well, leaving the negotiations, our allies walking away, that sounds bad. What's wrong with that analysis?
Look, we think it misses a couple of points. As I said earlier, the Iranians need this deal more than we do. And frankly, the reality is, as any of you have conducted business negotiations, here, it happens from time to time that parties leave the negotiating table. That's a tactic. We shouldn't be afraid of that. And here the reality is that we need to be able to bring them back to the table and keep them there, and only through dramatic pressure. And as regards our allies, look, there's a significant chunk of our allies that don't want the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon any more than Israel, the United States, does. And for the other nations, frankly, the only reason that they're maintaining the sanctions is because we, the United States, gave them a choice through our laws that they could do business with Iran or do business with us. And they can't do both. And so long as we are clear about that, they'll stick with us.
Well, Congress has had a significant role in helping to force them make that choice. I wonder if you can talk about the congressional perspective on Iran.
Yeah, look, thank goodness for Congress. Congress, yes. By the way, Congress, through successive administrations, the most important thing over the last 20 years is that Congress has attempted to keep the issue of the emerging Iran nuclear weapons program on the minds of American people and our decision makers. And for that, we are deeply appreciative to Congress. And the second thing is that Congress, time and time again, has led the effort to put pressure on the regime in Tehran.
Give an example of a specific example of how that worked.
I think the best example that comes to mind is the central bank sanctions that just happened 2 years ago, frankly, with the support of everyone in this room. Congress took the lead and passed central bank sanctions that said to the central banks of the world, including our own, you can do business with Iran or you can do business with our central bank, which is critical to the international economy. And the reality is it was over the objections of all these forces in Congress, 99-0 in the Senate and overwhelming in the House, passed these. And then the administration who had opposed this took ownership of this, and they actually implemented it. And we believe that those sanctions, led by Congress, became the tipping point that brought the Iranian economy to a free fall. And it was at that moment the tipping point came. They realized, boy, we got to get to negotiation and get out from under these sanctions here. That's a perfect example of what we're talking about.
So what's the congressional role now, and what is the congressional role going forward?
Look, the congressional role now, Richard, is they need to keep the economic pressure on before there's an agreement. Any hope we have of getting to a better deal is predicated on that pressure. And that's why efforts like Kirk Menendez in the Senate and the companion pieces in the House matter so much prior to a deal. And the second thing is, they also have to do things to make sure this stays on the American agenda.
So let me ask you this. In the event that a deal emerges and is announced by the administration, does Congress have a role at that point?
A critical role. It doesn't end. Congressional role doesn't end when there's a deal. In fact, it becomes the next very important phase. The most important of which, and you heard a little bit of this earlier on the stage from our good friend Senator Graham and Senator Cardin, Congress must review this deal to see whether it meets the threshold of what is a good deal and a bad deal. And the heart of that, does it call and demand for the dismantling of the nuclear infrastructure? That's what we're looking for. That's what Congress is looking for. So the ability to look at that, to review it, and determine with approval or disapproval here becomes a critical role for Congress to play. And there's legislation now pending before the Senate that calls exactly for that. And the second thing is to remember the following. What the Iranians want the most from the West and from the United States, Richard, is that they want permanent sanctions relief. An administration can only temporarily waive the sanctions that are on the American books, on American laws. Only permanent relief can come from Congress. So Congress has a critical role to play if there's going to be relief or not, and we believe that ought to be judged on whether the deal is good or not, and even if it is a good deal, to ensure that the Iranians are complying, because that's going to be a critical role that they must play.
So in the aftermath of the announcement of a deal, should that take place, our role and Congress's role will still be vital and important.
Just as important as it was to keep the pressure on. If there is a deal, our role has just begun.
I want to turn to another question. It's maybe the most sensitive question that you and I get as we travel around the country. It has to do with use of force. It's said that, you know, as I've already said, we're for, and you've repeated, we're for more pressure now in order to get a good deal. And many say, if you're for more pressure now, then you're not for any deal, and in fact, you're for war. And it's set up as that binary choice. Either you're for this deal or you're for war. How do you react to that? How would you ask others to react to that?
Look, that's a false choice. In fact, anyone that says that the only option is that we accept a nuclear Iran or there's war, or you have to accept this exact deal, or you want more pressure to be brought on the Iranians to get to a better deal. All of those things create a false choice. It's actually outrageous that that happens. It's a pernicious argument, yes. And I got to tell you that it's meant for only one reason that people make this argument. It's meant to silence the critics. And we will not be silent.
Oh, okay, but what if negotiations do fail? What happens then?
Look, negotiations do fail. It doesn't end. We need to go back to increasing the pressure on the Iranians, the very things that brought them to the table to begin with. We need to increase the pressure. And we need to reinforce the notion here, we want a diplomatic outcome here that leads to a good deal. And the fact that if it doesn't happen by March 24th, that doesn't mean the process ends. We just have to continue with the pressure because they need to come out from this. Again, reminder, they need the deal more than we do. And if we increase the pressure, that'll become even more the case.
I want to shift topics. We don't have that much time this morning, so I want to ask you one question unrelated to Iran, and that has to do with Israel and the Palestinians. Is there any hope of coaxing Abbas back to the table and re-engagement in direct bilateral talks that somehow finds a way forward between Israel and the Palestinians?
Richard, we can't give up on hope that the Israelis and the Palestinians will find a way to negotiate a successful peace process that leads to two states for two people, a Jewish state for the Jewish people and a Palestinian state for the Palestinian people. AIPAC remains committed to that, and all of us cannot give up hope for the sake of Israel itself. But unfortunately, President Abbas, the leader of the Palestinian Authority, has made a series of very, very bad decisions. First, he got in bed with the terrorist organization Hamas, and he's not left it. Second, he's decided to internationalize this conflict. So instead of directly negotiating with the Israelis, he thinks he can achieve his state through the UN Security Council, through the International Criminal Court, through the UN Human Rights Council. He has declared diplomatic warfare on Israel. And we need to oppose that. We need to send a message to him. There's only one path to achieve what he wants, and that's to sit down and negotiate with the people of Israel.
So what can Congress and the administration do to coax Abbas back to the table?
Look, I think the most important thing they can do right now is to speak with one voice to President Abbas. That there are no other options, there is no easy way out other than sitting down with the government of Israel and negotiate. And the second thing is to understand that we should suspend assistance to the Palestinian Authority. One of the reasons we provide assistance, in addition to his renouncing terrorism, is that he would sit down and negotiate. Declaring diplomatic warfare on Israel is not negotiating here, and he needs to have a message here that there's a consequence.
But the point of suspending aid, from your perspective, is not punitive.
No, it's just meant to be a suspension. He gives the opportunity to come back for him to make the different choice we want him to make.
So let me conclude this morning by getting your reaction to one final thought. You and I encounter this literally everywhere we go in some version or another, and it was best exemplified in a speech I gave a couple weeks ago. At the end of the speech, a gentleman raises his hand and he says, I'd like to thank you for depressing us. And he says, I truly don't understand how you get up in the morning and continue on when things are so bleak. But, you know, the funny thing is, I know I'm not depressed. I'm feeling pretty optimistic. And I know you're not depressed. You're feeling pretty optimistic. Why is that?
Richard, look, first of all, you and I are optimistic people, and frankly, I think everyone in this room is optimistic. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here, and you wouldn't do what you do every single day on behalf of the U.S.-Israel relationship. And look, I know these are challenging times, but I'll tell you why I fundamentally remain optimistic, and that's because if you look back on the long arc of Israel from its founding till today, Israel has been through far darker times than the one we're in at the moment. And today, the reality is there is a strong, vibrant Israel that exists today. It's a healthy democracy. And it's not only here to protect itself, yes, and the Jewish citizens, it remains a beacon of light to the nation in the way that it behaves and the contributions that it makes here. And that is a cause for optimism for all of us. And then, frankly, there's America. America is now the lone superpower in the world and remains Israel's closest friend. And we can't take that for granted. And the last fact, yes, the last fact is, frankly, the 16,000 pro-Israel Americans who came to Washington because you understand the meaning of this moment in history.
It's not just the largest gathering, it's the most diverse.
Yeah. Just look around. It's the most diverse here. There are more progressives and conservatives, liberal, Democrats and Republicans, African Americans, Hispanics, Christians, veterans, students. Look around the room than we've ever had before because they understand. And yes, applaud to everyone here. This is America's movement, and this is what gives me confidence that we have the ability to affect the course of American policy on Iran's nuclear project, as well as the continued and much-needed bipartisan American support for Israel and the U.S.-Israel relationship. And we have to commit ourselves to be the ones to step in the breach when there are tensions. That is our role. So yes, I'm optimistic. And fundamentally, I'm optimistic. Because while the challenge is great, Richard, when we act together, so are we.
Thank you, Howard. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Reserve IDF Sergeant First Class Ellie Isaacson.
In the military, having access to your weapon is essential. But when evacuating the wounded, sometimes you have to choose between carrying your weapon or carrying your injured friend. As an IDF paratrooper, I learned that firsthand during the Second Lebanon War. While operating in southern Lebanon, our unit was attacked. In an instant, 9 were killed and 29 were injured. Still under intense mortar fire, the most important thing was getting our injured to safety. With only traditional stretchers requiring a man on each corner, leaving nobody available for perimeter security, our unit walked our injured through 5 miles of rockets and gunfire back to the Israeli border. Years after the war, the memory of my comrades left at their most vulnerable, while saving other people's lives stayed with me. So we created a company to make better load-bearing solutions. Among them, the Injured Personnel Carrier, or IPC. The IPC is incredibly simple. It fits in your pocket, it weighs next to nothing, and it allows soldiers to carry a wounded person on their back like a backpack, leaving their hands free to defend themselves. Not long after the IPC became available, we received orders from special forces and law enforcement units around the world, as well as from firefighters and disaster relief personnel. And then we started getting single orders from all over the world, from civilians. We weren't entirely sure why, until the thank you notes started arriving. People were using the IPC in extraordinary ways. From a grandfather in Middlebury, Indiana, who uses the IPC to help his granddaughter with special needs in and out of the pool. From the director of a Costa Rican adventure camp for children with mobility issues. From an Australian who uses it to take her paralyzed friends surfing. And from the Jennings family in Oneonta, New York.
We've got 2 sons, one a teenager, one about to be a teenager, and our youngest son had cerebral palsy.
With Kieran, he was born 2.5 months early and got really, really sick when he was in the NICU. He had fungal meningitis.
It's almost surreal when you have those moments as parents. You want to be strong. I want to be strong for my wife. I want to be strong for my child. Understanding then that there's going to be challenges ahead.
And I just remember waiting and thinking, I'm waiting for him to smile. I'm waiting for him to look at me and to see that recognition in his eyes. And then we're gonna prove the doctors wrong and we're gonna do amazing things. And I'm just waiting for you, for the light to turn on. And then there it was. We brought him home about 2 months after he was born. His physical therapist came and saw us the very first day. And she showed me a whole bunch of things to do. And she said, you know, the more you can do them, the better. And that just became my focus, just pushing him as far as we could, as early as we could. And Kieran just fought his way through with like typical Kieran
tenacity.
Yeah, he just wouldn't give up.
I would describe myself as fearless because life is a race. You have to not be afraid. Whatever doesn't kill you and make you stronger. And that's basically it.
With Kieran, I usually end up talking about what it's like for him to navigate the world every day. Doing simple things like, how's he going to carry his backpack around school and not have it be so heavy that it doesn't tip him over backwards?
You know, something that is simple for you or I, walking upstairs, doesn't get our heart rate going, it's not physically difficult. For him it is. So we have to be mindful of that when we did things.
We live right next to a park. We're probably there almost every day, even if it's just walking the dog. But there are trails in the park, and that kind of turned into, Kieran really likes to hike. How can we get out there and do more?
A friend of ours who's a climber did some research. We talked to him about it, and he found the IPC online. The original creator was in the Israeli Defense Force. It was designed so that you could carry someone who's injured or wounded with your hands free.
And we pulled it up on the website and we were watching it, and I remember Liam and Kieran were like, oh, that's so cool, let's get that.
They loved the idea that they wanted to get one in camouflage. I said, black's gonna be fine.
Why am I passionate about hiking? Number one, we get to see the great outdoors. Every vacation is like something new. Like, what new stuff are we gonna discover today? Or like next vacation?
You know, if we go back maybe 2 or 3 years, we probably wouldn't have done a hike like that. So it's really motivated us to try to do more challenging things with the IPC and to hike harder trails and, you know, just to work together.
Now I think we have the confidence to know, Kieran has the confidence to know, we all do, that we can try it.
Instead of wasting all his energy trying to get up the whole entire mountain himself, we put it on, we carry him to a spot where we think it's safe for him to then walk on his own. But he feels very comfortable up on your back, using that. Like, he feels very secure.
It's amazing. You can wear a 12-year-old as a backpack. That's pretty impressive.
We work hard, you know, we're climbing the mountain, we're getting over all these obstacles, and then we get to the point where you reach the pinnacle, this one great moment. And getting to the top of Owl's Head this vacation was kind of that moment, to stand there and look and say, you know, look where we are, look how hard you worked to get up here. Before we ordered the IPC, I didn't have any kind of personal connection to Israel. And what I think is really amazing is the way the IPC brought us here in tiny little Oneonta, New York, together with Israel, this small country halfway around the world that I really didn't think about before. And it's now had a large impact on our family.
That was really hard. Challenge is over. And then basically my mind's thinking, hey, I can take on anything.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to welcome to the stage Tom, Kirsten, Liam, and Kieran Jennings.
Kirsten and I always encourage our sons to follow their dreams. We believe that if Liam can do it, Kieran can do it too. Every 4th of July, my wife and Liam run in our town's annual adventure race. And this past summer, Kieran wanted to run it too. So we grabbed our IPC and we tackled 3 miles of obstacles and finished as a family. Tenacity and resilience are important characteristics to us, and luckily, those same traits inspire Ali and the people of Israel too. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Massachusetts Undersecretary for Homeland Security and Emergency Management, Kurt Schwartz.
The afternoon of April 15, 2013 was a perfect day for the running of the 117th Boston Marathon. By 2:50 in the afternoon, 20,000 runners had already crossed the finish line, and 7,000 more were in the home stretch. But in an instant, everything changed. Terrorists exploded 2 bombs at the finish line, and 3 people were dead and hundreds injured. As our first responders moved into action, I joined a small group of public safety leaders near the finish line to command the response to the terrorist attack. Each one of us had worked together and commanded together, and each of us had been to Israel to receive specialized anti-terrorism training from the most experienced teachers in the world. We all drew on our experience and time in Israel as we managed through this terrorist attack. This is my Israel story. In 2011, I joined other Homeland Security officials on a trip to Israel to learn how the Jewish state prepares for and responds to terrorist attacks. 18 months after my trip to Israel, as I stood at the marathon finish line just moments after the explosions, I had a moment of clarity. I knew these were IEDs, deadly devices similar to those that the Israeli people have endured for years, and that our troops have faced in Iran and Afghanistan. Throughout the entire ordeal in Boston, my thoughts returned again and again to the Jewish state and my week of intensive training in Israel. Israel has taught us the importance of standing strong in the face of a terrorist attack. Israel showed us how to communicate with the public and the importance of being resilient, of treating the psychological wounds from an attack along with the obvious visible injuries. And Israel has showed us the importance of moving on. Last year, the Boston Marathon was one of the largest ever. "36,000 runners and over 1 million spectators. We came back bigger and stronger." The lessons I learned in Israel made a difference during a terrible day for my city. They helped me do my job better and to keep my community safer. And I am proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with our friends in Israel and to know that they helped us ensure that we always
will be Boston strong. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tracy Volke.
My husband Paul and I were high school sweethearts. He went to West Point into the military, while I went to law school and became an attorney. Together, we raised our sons, AJ and Benjamin, moving from base to base wherever Paul was stationed. I was raised Jewish, and though Paul was not, he wanted our boys to learn about their heritage, religion, and feel connected to their Jewish identity. We had a wonderful life together with lots of love and lots to look forward to. In 2012, Paul was killed in Afghanistan. Soon after Paul's passing, I was contacted by an American organization called TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. TAPS works directly with military families like ours after they've lost a loved one. They provided comfort for me, mentors to my sons, and connected us to other military families experiencing the same type of loss. Last summer, TAPS launched a new program with the Widows and Orphans IDF, a group that also provides counseling and support to Israelis who have lost a family member in combat. Through this program, they hosted a 2-week-long exchange in Israel and offered us the chance to participate. So together, with other American families, we traveled all over Israel. We stayed with an Israeli family who had also lost a husband and a father. We shared our stories and our pictures, our grief and our hope. Over the course of the trip, one day stands out to me. It was Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance for Fallen Soldiers. We were visiting Mount Herzl, Israel's national cemetery. Joining us were a World War II veteran and a Holocaust survivor. There, between two heroes of the most iconic moments in American and Jewish history, we were asked to place the wreath on Herzl's grave. At that moment, I watched my son transform from a boy who had just lost his father into a young man, standing a bit taller, as he honored the fallen heroes of Israel in memory of his own fallen hero. We lived mostly in small towns with small Jewish populations, if any at all. And though we always did our best to make Judaism a part of our family's life, in most places we lived, AJ and Benjamin were the only Jewish children in their classes. But in Israel, AJ connected to his Jewish heritage in a way that I wish Paul was there to see. AJ spoke Hebrew with other kids his age. He wore his kippah throughout the day, and even for several weeks when we returned home. The trip ignited a spark in AJ. He lit up. In Israel, we found a community of families who, like ours, and like all too many of our military friends, understand that grief and loss can be common, but never easy. An ocean apart, we are connected by our shared experience. Now this is our community. This is our family. This is Israel. Thank you.
Another internet security scare.
In a statement, Target says their credit card information may be in the hands of hackers.
eBay says an encrypted database has been hacked,
Which resulted in the disclosure of tens of thousands of leaked emails and other materials.
Today, it doesn't take very much to be a bad guy on the internet.
Cyber attacks are real attacks. Cyber attackers are trying to maneuver our life or to change our life by stealing our money from the banks, trying to affect critical infrastructure, trying to take our intellectual properties, and all these things are considered to be, by me, as if it is a real war. I think Israelis are the best of taking a threat and turning it into an opportunity.
Cybersecurity is a global sport, and we're only as good as our whole team. We have an agreement between the U.S. government and the Israeli government to work together in research and development in cybersecurity. We see a lot of these cybersecurity solutions being worked on in the Negev.
What we can see here is an international cybersecurity hub developing in the middle of nowhere with camels walking around here still sometimes, and moved to the Negev in 1996, which is almost 20 years ago. None of this looked anything like we can see it now, and much of this is going to change over the next decade or two as the IDF moves here, as all of these multinational companies and industries move into the advanced technology park. Here at Ben Gurion University, we're now fulfilling Ben Gurion's dream by attracting young population to live and work in the Negev.
The idea is to bring together academia and industry and to build on the capacities of each other. The research capacity in the university, the knowledge, the experience of the private company, to really intensify our ability to come out with solutions not only to local needs, but also to international needs in the cyberspace.
So Lockheed Martin have been collaborating with Israel for more than 2 decades. We registered Lockheed Martin Israel, which have offices both in Tel Aviv and in the Negev region here in Beersheba, which enables now to be more involved in the IT projects in Israel, hire local force, and create more jobs opportunities and projects both here in Israel and to the US.
Much of what is happening here is very similar to what happened years ago in California around Stanford, and then the development of the Silicon Valley. By developing the technologies that will protect data and allow all of these communications that already exist over cyber networks, we're actually providing a much safer livelihood for everyone in the world.
The one vision that Ben Gurion didn't manage to fulfill was developing the Negev. So in a way, I said, this was one mission he didn't accomplish. Maybe I can help accomplish.
I think we're going to flourish here and create very unique solutions around cyber, not only for Israel, but for the world. The Negev is where you can be a pioneer in Israel. You want a dream come true? You better come to the Negev.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Howard Kohr.
Thank you again. I just came out because, as with all times when you have so many moving pieces here, one of our speakers has just arrived here today. And if you just could wait a minute or so, we're going to do the next phase of the program. So I just came out just to ask everyone here just to introduce yourself to your neighbors, and we'll continue with the rest of the show in a moment. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Middle East analyst for Walla and the Times of Israel, Avi Issacharoff.
Good morning, everyone. 5 years ago, I had the privilege of introducing a remarkable story to the world. It was a story about terrorism, espionage, and loyalty, the unlikeliest friendship, and, yes, redemption. The story revealed to the world that the #1 intelligence asset to the Israeli Shin Bet was also the son of the leader of Hamas in the West Bank. He was responsible for exposing terror cells, preventing dozens of suicide attacks, and foiling assassination plots against Israeli officials. I've known him for more than a decade as Musab Hassan Youssef. You might know him as the Green Prince.
Recruiting is an art. He asked me, would you work for us? They needed someone like me. This is a big achievement. And I knew, like through his eyes, that was like the biggest recruitment that he had so far. Few months after I agreed to work for the agency, my father's release from prison was arranged. My father needed someone to be his assistant, and he could not find better person than his oldest son that he can trust.
We called him the Green Prince. Fast, he understood that this is his secret name in the Shin Bet, and he acted as a prince.
I start to realize that we are living a lie, and people are dying because of this lie. And this is why, I continued, because I needed to answer those questions for my soul.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Musab Hassan Youssef. Long way from Ramallah, isn't it?
I think so. This is why I'm late.
Look what's going on with all the screens.
Yeah,
There's so many Musabs and Avis around us. We're surrounded. Wow. You know that the first time that I saw you, back in 2004, the entrance to Ramallah, when your father was released from the Israeli jail. And now we're here sitting in AIPAC's policy conference. And I'm wondering, what was it like to be raised in Ramallah for a family of Hamas, Muslim Brotherhood? Your mother's family is coming from the Muslim Brotherhood. Your father is one of the founders of Hamas. What was it like?
Well, first of all, it's a privilege. It's a great honor to be here, participating in this very important policy conference. Truly. Sometimes I try to rationalize, what the son of a Hamas leader doing in a big Jewish event like this. And the only way to see it, I came up with a theory. I think maybe I was, in a previous life, a very bad Jew. Then I was reincarnated in the household of a Hamas leader to work out my karmas.
Yeah.
This is why I'm here.
Yeah.
So
I think you're right.
Thank you for your acceptance. I really appreciate it. Thank you. I know we are limited on time. I grew up believing in the conspiracy theory that Israel, America, the West hate Muslims. They have conspiracy. They're plotting day and night to destroy Islam, to destroy the Muslim world, and keep people in ignorance. This is in a simple way what we were taught. I saw Israel as the enemy. I saw the United States of America as the greatest enemy. And we believed in this lie. I was brought up in a state of delusion. It took lots of effort to be able to break through the barriers and make it all the way from Ramallah, not to Washington, D.C., but from Ramallah mentality to a higher truth, where I am able to see things more clearly, if I can say.
And it's really fascinating because I remember that in the book you described the places that you lived in, and you grew up just next to a cemetery, just next to a place where you saw all the shaheeds, all the martyrs, so-called, that were buried. I mean, it's quite awful to hear all these things that you heard.
Yes, well, in theory, people are telling you all our suffering is because of Israel, the United States, and the West. Practically, you see people dying on a daily basis. But it was very hard to see through the lens of a child and make the connection that Yasser Arafat, then all the Palestinian leaderships sitting in Qatar, in Turkey, in Tunisia, and other locations, sending children to die on checkpoints to make more money. So they were corrupted. I could not see that the real enemy was the leadership of the Palestinians. I blamed everything on Israel, and this what confirmed the lie to me. As now many people believe in the lie and they see violence, they see children dying in Gaza, but they don't see that Hamas and other Palestinian factions are the actual enemy.
So how on earth did you do this transformation? I mean, from someone lived and grew up to Hamas's family, then again, everything that we heard, and then you become an Israeli agent. I mean, what? Did they put a gun to your head? Did they threaten you? I mean, the Shin Bet, the Israeli Shin Bet, did they torture you? What did they do?
Look, I grew up suffering, as many people who suffer in that region. And I always wanted to know the source of our suffering. And you can say that I made many irrational decisions. I did not follow the mind. The mind can be very deceptive. I followed the heart, and I saw a different truth, even though sometimes I had to get out of my comfort zone. One of the most irrational decisions was to work for the State of Israel. It started with the motive of revenge. Then it became...
You wanted to kill your Shin Bet handler, right?
Without specifying the goal, I was full of hatred, and I thought I could penetrate the agency, and this is why I said yes from the beginning. And that put me on a journey with the agency. Later on, I was surprised and shocked by the truth that I saw through the eyes of the other. And I saw a different truth than the wisdom on the Palestinian street.
I remember that you told that the handler in one of the first meetings asked you, did you pray today? Did you eat? Instead of pushing you, instead of threatening you, he was very nice.
Yes, well, Hamas used to tell us that Israel is going to blackmail you. Israel will put a gun and threaten to kill you if you don't work for them. And here I am with, I would say, evil intention. You know, my intention was to kill them, was to take revenge. It was a very destructive idea. And all I see humanity. I see that they were very caring about the human life in general. Yes, they were very hard on terrorism. They did not tolerate a terrorist. But in the meantime, the way they looked at Palestinians in general, civilians, we were very careful in all our operations to make sure that civilians were not involved. And that was a different truth. And I needed to understand, you know, and come to a place where I can reconcile with myself. On one hand, I believe in something. I believe in theory that Israel is all about to kill Palestinians. Israelis are thirsty for the Palestinian blood. But now here I am in the heart of the Israeli intelligence service. And I see that the intention is not to kill civilians, not to kill Palestinians. So this is where, you know, I needed to be truthful to myself, where I stand. It was not about Israel now. It was not about Palestine. It was about me. Will I stand for my truth that I'm witnessing? Or will I just stick my head in the sand and obey other people's theories and scripture?
Now, you write in your book that working for the Shin Bet was a kind of a game. And I remember a couple of crazy stories that you tell in this book that I thought that were phenomenal. Can you share with us one of the stories of how you managed to foil a suicide attempt and how you managed to foil even the Israeli authorities or the Israeli army that thought that you were still a Hamas wanted terrorist?
One day I had two strangers come into our house and they asked him for my father. My father was not at the house, he was in a hide. So I told them, you cannot reach him, you have to go through me first. They said, we are 5 suicide bombers, we came from Jordan, and our help was arrested last night. And we are afraid that Israel would know about our secret location. We have our gear in this car, and we need a safe place just for a few hours. This is why we're here. Now, we were struggling. We were working very hard to put our hand on a suicide bomber before they reach their target. And here I am, face to face with 5 of them. Of course, you know, I couldn't tell them, wait, let me call my Shin Bet handler and see what we can do. And if you let them go, you will hear about them only in the news. So I had to take responsibility, and I was on my own. I had 2 options: to stick my head in the sand and pretend that I did not see, even call my Shin Bet handler and tell him this is too dangerous for me, I'm out. They're not going to come and kill me. The other option was to do the right thing. Suicide bombers were targeting Palestinians, Americans, Israelis. They don't differentiate. Humanity is their target, even though they don't realize the danger and the destruction that they're doing. So basically, I told them, you sit in a safe house, wait for me. I'm in charge now. I gave them a little bit of money. I took their car, and I put their car, I remember, in our garage, next to my mother and siblings. And I could not even explain to my mother why she should have to evacuate or leave the house. So I called the agency, and within about 30 minutes, the Israeli Prime Minister at that time decided to drop a bomb on their house. I refused to be part of assassinations. Then the agency made a plan to arrest them. They were arrested, and they mentioned my name, that I give them money and put them in a safe house. Now, the agency, on one hand, could not afford to arrest me because I would leave a huge vacuum in the area. Yeah. We were part of many other operations. And if they leave me outside, I would become suspicious, and Hamas would kill me. So the only way to save my life was to deceive the Israeli army, to deceive Hamas, and to deceive the journalists like yourself. And the game that we played was to send Israeli defense forces, special forces, to make it look like they are trying to arrest me, and I escape in a miraculous way.
And they destroyed the house, right?
They did not destroy the house completely, but they evacuate, first of all, my mother and my brothers. They launched a missile into the house when I did not surrender.
While you were sitting somewhere safe, yes, with the Shin Bet sending you there.
Yes, I was actually sitting in a safe house looking at TV, Al Jazeera, and seeing our house on fire. And I know that the whole thing is just a game.
And you became like one of the most famous terrorists in the West Bank because of that.
Right. After this event, I became the most wanted person in Ramallah area. When I went back home, my mother told me, disappear, don't come back. And my father was very afraid for me. Other Hamas leadership was now responsible for my security and my safety. So they end up putting me in all the safe houses where other wanted Hamas people hanging out. And this way we penetrate the Hamas security and military wing, and we crack down the entire Hamas military wing in the West Bank. Yeah.
Amazing. Now I want to ask you something personal.
Sure.
You know, at 2008 you called me. You said, hey, what's going on? Where are you, man? I said, I'm in Israel. Where are you? You said, I'm in San Diego. Okay, I was planned to go with AIPAC to San Diego, and you said that you have a very special story for me. Why on earth did you call me? And not anyone else, like Palestinian journalists, American journalists, you decided to call me.
Well, you have been to our house, to my father's office. You saw me in action. And your perception of me at that time was just another Hamas member, an assistant for a Hamas top leader. You didn't know that I was...
a good source, by the way.
Thank you, I appreciate it, thank you. At that time, you didn't know that I was part of the Israeli operation. And I thought if I tell you the story, you would be able to make the connection and piece the puzzle in a much better way than any other person who did not meet me. And also, the story came on a very high personal price. And I did not want the media to come and take this personal struggle and twist it and bend it to serve some other agendas. The reason to come out with this story, truly to help an entire generation, Palestinian generation and Israeli generation, to see things for what they are. Sometimes we trust our perceptual ability, but apparently our senses are very deceptive. And there is always a different truth beneath what seems or appears. And with that said, I thought bringing the story to the region would help people see things for what they are, help them mature, and take responsibility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, one last question. So, you're here at AIPAC, in front of thousands of pro-Israel Americans, and you've spoken for AIPAC across the country. What is it about Israel, and what about this cause that inspires you to share your story like that? I mean, surrounded with so many people that looks at you and say, he's a hero. Did you imagine back then in the days that we met each other in the West Bank, that one day you will find yourself like that, with 15,000 people around you, thinking of you as a hero?
When I was first introduced to Christ consciousness, I learned how to love my enemy unconditionally, and was the core of my motive. And this what put me on this crazy experiment, irrational experiment with truth. And I did not expect that the Israeli nation, and when I say the Israeli nation, I don't mean the Israel political boundaries, not Israel as a government. I'm talking about the nation that extends from Latin America to North America to Asia, everywhere. Israel to me is not only a political regime. Israel is light. Israel is philosophy. Israel is values and ethics. And I cannot imagine the world without Israel. Israel, thank you. To me, to see the love and the unconditional support now truly lifts me up. I thought for many years that I was alone, and that was a lie. I believe we are all on the same field of consciousness, where there is persecution. I see a nation that faced a catastrophe like the Holocaust, came over that catastrophe, and found strength to build, to establish an amazing state, give humanity values, ethics, unconditionally, show an example of unconditional love and forgiveness. This is where I stand. It's not about politics. It's not about anything else. To me, I'm part of this process. I'm very proud to be here today. And I really appreciate that the organizers invited me to this event. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Musab, Hassan, Yusuf. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our morning program. Please check your personal schedule for your next event and enjoy your day.
כל המקומות שבהם היית, עולמות שראית וגילית, כל השאלות שבדרך שאלת, לפעמים לא העזת לגלות. אורות מהבהבים בשתי שניות, חולפים חיי אל מול עיניי, כל